Welcome, Scouts. We're going to start on our Wilderness Survival Merit Badge here. Wilderness Survival, taking care of ourselves in ways that allow us to come home safely, is what we do whenever we are in the outdoors. Most of the time we get along just fine when we are camping, backpacking, canoeing, and taking part in other outdoor activities. We have brought along the clothing and gear we need. We've made good plans and we do our best to manage any risks. But now and then, something unexpected happens. We wander off a trail and lose our way, somebody becomes injured, a storm catches us by surprise, a boat capsizes, a snowmobile runs out of gas far from a road, we no longer know where we are, or we find ourselves without equipment, water, and food that we usually take on our adventures. When things go wrong, the skills in wilderness survival can help make everything right again. Thinking through the challenges that face us and coming up with good solutions are vital to taking care of ourselves in the outdoors, especially when we must get out of difficulties. Wilderness survival means knowing how to stay alive and well until the emergency is over. It means working with nature rather than against it. It means always having a positive attitude. The one essential that can't be carried in a backpack or pocket is a positive attitude. Mastering wilderness survival takes practice. During trips to the outdoors that are not emergencies, you can learn to light a fire without matches, build a shelter without a tent, signal for help, and practice first aid. Earning the Wilderness Survival Merit Badge will get you started in the right direction, but there is always more to learn. Natural disasters. As recent events in the United States have shown, the skills of wilderness survival can be every bit as important during natural disasters as they are during backcountry outings. Hurricanes, tornadoes, windstorms, blizzards, wildfires, and power outages can put people in situations where the usual networks of support are not available. People might be on their own for a few hours or a few days or even longer periods of time. The preparations you take to respond to emergencies, whether in city, rural area, or deep in the wilderness, are the same. Whenever an emergency occurs, use your head to sight up the situation and seek out solutions. The best way to survive in the outdoors is basically preparation, preventing the emergencies. The best emergency is one that never happens. Prevention is the result of prepping well, making good plans, and having the proper equipment. As you begin thinking about what you will do in a case of an emergency, it can be helpful to know some of the primary causes of survival situations, such as not planning ahead or failure to prepare a trip plan, not having good leadership in your group, being in poor physical condition, wearing the wrong clothing or footwear, or lacking the motivation or skills for the activity, not eating enough or eating the wrong diet, becoming too tired, too cold, or too hot or thirsty, not recognizing and dealing with a potential problem, encountering unexpected changes in the weather or unexpected terrain. Common sense ways to increase your safety and your enjoyment in the outdoor adventures are covered in the 7 points of the BSA Trek Safely Plan. 1. Qualified supervision. Whenever planning a trek, make sure your group includes a mature, conscientious adult, at least 21 years old, who understands the potential risks involved in the trip that can take the responsibility for the group's safety. 1 additional adult, who is at least 18 years old, must also accompany the group. 2. Keep fit. You can train for a trip in the outdoors just like any other athletic event. Start slowly, gradually increasing the duration and intensity of your workouts to build your physical fitness and stamina. Staying in good shape helps you keep ready for physical demands of a trek. It says here there's also additional details on Trek Safely on the BSA website, which is www.scouting.org. Number 3, plan ahead. Any trip you plan should match the skill level and fitness of the members of the group. Remember to get permission from the landowner if you plan to cross or use private land, and research the terrain, elevation changes, trails, wildlife, campsites, typical weather conditions, and environmental issues for the period of the trek. Know where you are going and what to expect. Gear up. Number 4. Before you leave, get topographic maps and current trail maps of the area. Take equipment including a first aid kit and clothing that is appropriate for the weather and is in good condition. Wear proper protection against the sun and biting insects and animals, and remember to adjust clothing layers to match the weather conditions. Drink plenty of water to stay hydrated. Number 5. Communicate clearly and completely. Communication is key to a safe outdoor adventure, and staying in touch with home base is first step. Complete a trip plan and share the details of your trek with someone back home. Better yet, two someone's. Number 6. Monitor conditions. The leaders are responsible for making good decisions during the trip based on their knowledge of the group's abilities. Keep an eye on weather conditions before and during the trip, and continually monitor your food and water, the group's morale, and their physical condition. Don't enter into a dangerous situation. Number 7 is discipline. Make sure everyone in your group understands the rules and procedures for safe trekking. When participants know the reasons behind the rules, they're much more likely to follow them. So, for making a trip plan, shows here a good blank form to fill out a trip plan, and what needs to be included on your trip plan is 5 questions. And they all start with the letter W. Where are we going and by which route? When will we return? Who is going? Why are we going? What are we taking with us? A copy of your trip plan should be left back home with one or more persons who are responsible, reliable, and available. If you don't return as scheduled, those back home can alert search and rescue personnel and give them a good idea to where to start looking for you. You can find more guidelines in the Guide to Safe Scouting at scouting.org, but that's a good place to start. Emergency survival kits. This is your requirement number 5. This is one that I will need pictures of in order to sign off on your blue cards as a complete merit badge. It shows here the outdoor essentials. These are things that you should always have with you. These are things that I always have in a backpack whenever I'm going anywhere. Pocket knife, first aid kit, extra clothing, rain gear, water bottle, flashlight, trail food, matches and fire starters, sun protection, map and compass. Adding some or all of the following items to your emergency kit can also come in handy during survival situations. Duct tape. I always bring some. My Nalgene bottle that I take into the woods with me has a number of wraps of duct tape around it. That's a good place to have it handy. A whistle. One of my ferro rods has an emergency whistle attached to it. A signal mirror. A metal signal mirror can be slipped into your first aid kit, which is where mine is, or a side pocket of your pack. Some wire. I have some thin wire that's wrapped around my water bottle underneath the duct tape. This one is a big one that I always tell people is a garbage bag, but not like the white one for your kitchen, but a big heavy-duty contractor bag. You can use it for rain gear or for your shelter or to collect tinder and kindling and to keep your equipment dry. Also, a lightweight backpacking tarp might also be a good thing in that case, but I always have like 2 heavy-duty garbage bags. Fishing lines and hooks. It doesn't take very much stuff to have you a little fishing kit. It's always a good idea to bring that stuff. Mobile phones and GPS. Global Positioning System, which is GPS, receivers allow travelers to pinpoint locations, but they are no substitute for mastering the use of map and compass. Likewise, your phones can be really good for this, but also you got to be conscientious of whether or not you have signal. So on my phone, I have downloaded everything that I think that I might need. You also have to have power, so a solar panel, or I actually have a hand crank charger for my phone if I need it. Always be thoughtful of the signal, so it's a good idea to download things ahead of time so that you don't need a signal. Moving on to clothing. Clothing is your first line of defense against the elements. It keeps you warm in the winter, cool in the summer, dry in storms, and sheltered from insects, sun, and wind. To help decide what you need, learn about the materials from which the clothing is made. The biggest thing I always talk about with survival shelters is what is your first shelter? It's your clothing. So that's why we wear clothing, because it protects us from the elements. If you have the proper clothing and adequate clothing for your trip, building a survival type shelter is not as important of a survival necessity. And here it talks about a couple of different types of fabric that the clothing might be made out of. I'll let you guys go ahead and read and review those. There is a warm weather and a cold weather checklist, so this is a good place to start when you are putting together your pack. Rain gear. I have a full rain suit. They're not very expensive nowadays. You can get a jacket and pants. The jacket should have a hood so you can cover your head. You should always have your rain gear with you. You can get ones that pack down really small and don't weigh very much. It goes a long way to prevent hypothermia and just being cold in general. Being prepared as a group. Many people keep things to themselves. They don't want to hold up the team or are worried about what others will think of them. An important step in avoiding a backcountry emergency is letting your companions know when you are having a hard time or you are aware of something that might affect your group. Remember, stopping for a few moments to deal with a hot spot on a heel can avoid bringing the group to a long halt after the day when the blisters start to break out. So say something about changing weather or change in your physical condition, or asking questions about the route that the group leaders have chosen can bring important matters to the attention of the rest of the group and help everyone make good decisions. It's a group activity, so if you guys are out there on a hike or hiking out to camp, always be vocal about any problems that you see arising or any problems that you might have arise. The most important is how you think about things when you're confronted with a survival situation, so knowledge is your best survival tool. So do your research, practice. There's tons and tons of content out there now for survival, so keeping a positive attitude is the biggest thing. A lot of survivors of wilderness emergencies have said that willingness to survive is the key factor in getting through a difficult situation. So it's key. You need to maintain a positive attitude even if you might be scared. Don't panic. We're going to talk about different ways that you can keep from the panic from setting in. But alright, so as in requirement number 2, From memory, list the 7 priorities for survival in backcountry or wilderness location. Explain the importance of each one with your counselor. So we're going to talk through all 7 of them here. Just to touch on avoiding panic, you can avoid panic by evaluating your resources. What do you and your companions have with you? How can you use them to make most of your situation and avoid possible risks? Staying busy, so that's another good way to avoid panic. That's why you should have a proper plan put in place and have your correct gear with you. And what to do when things go wrong. The 7 priorities of survival in a backcountry or wilderness location will give you a good approach to acting effectively when things don't go as planned. Number 1, STOP. STOP is an acronym in this case, so it stands for stop, think, observe, and plan. The moment you think that you might be lost, stop immediately. If you ever feel fear, stop immediately. Put your hands in your pockets and take a deep breath. I always say to find a stump or a log to sit on, sit down, 30 minutes. Give yourself 30 minutes to drink a little water, eat some snack, figure out what you have with you, and evaluate. That's the think portion of the STOP acronym is think. Assemble the group. Use your brain to figure out what is really going on. If you think you're lost, study your map and try to determine where you are. Look for landmarks. Note the contours of the hills, ridges, or mountains, and where you are in relation to streams or lakes. If you don't have a map, try to remember where you could have gotten off course. What was the last landmark that you positively identified? In what direction did you travel from there? If you were on a trail or road, can you follow back to your starting point? If you have left footprints in the snow, can you retrace your step? Don't go anywhere just yet. Stop and think. Observe is the O. Observe. So assess the immediate situation. Does anyone need additional first aid? What are the weather conditions? Where is a good place to take shelter? Inventory everything you have in your pack and pockets and look around you to get a sense of the natural resources nearby. What clothing do you have? How can you improvise with what is available around you to make it suit your needs? Don't go anywhere yet. There's still no rush. Stop, think, and observe. And then the P is plan. When you have figured out what your situation really is, the group can put together a plan for what to do next. Build your plan on what you have observed, what you have in the way of equipment, what you can improvise from natural materials, and how you can keep yourself safe. Put into practice the survival steps you have learned and wait as calmly as you can for help to arrive. Plan carefully and cautiously. Don't make your situation worse by acting hastily. If you have left a written trip plan with a responsible person before leaving home, your failure to return on time should trigger a search effort. Most people are found within 24 hours of becoming lost or encountering difficulties in the backcountry. You could, if you had to, survive much longer. So don't panic, don't be in a rush to turn around and try to retrace your steps right away. Stop, think, observe, and plan. And like I said, take at least half an hour to sit down and figure out what's around you. Number 2 is to provide first aid. This is what you should do in the first step of stop if somebody has urgent first aid. Otherwise, step 2 in the survival priorities is to provide first aid. Treat life-threatening injuries and illnesses immediately. As you begin putting together your survival plan, take time to properly examine anyone who's been hurt and decide on a course of action to care for that person. Number 3 is seek shelter. If you're wearing proper clothing, this doesn't mean that you would have to do anything here. You may not be wearing proper clothing, and in that case, there's a picture in here of a guy in his garbage bag all huddled up, or you can improvise a natural shelter, but as long as you're wearing the proper clothing, you don't have to try to construct anything. So the body's core is a heat regulator. It does all it can do to keep you warm in cold weather and cool in hot weather. If your body gets too hot, you might suffer heat exhaustion or heat stroke, which we covered in First Aid Merit Badge. If it gets too cold, hypothermia can set in. Whatever the weather, if your body's core temperature rises or sinks more than a few degrees from normal, you will find it harder to think and more difficult to function well. In the worst cases, the illnesses of heat and cold can cause unconsciousness or even death. Surviving long enough to be rescued can be summed up as doing all you can to help your body maintain its ideal temperature without using more energy than necessary. That means giving it shelter. Shelter structure. Shelter extends the effectiveness of your clothing by adding another layer to your insulation and a wind blocking system. As with all aspects of wilderness survival, assess the materials you have around you and make a plan to make an effective shelter. You will want to assemble a shelter that does the job, but that takes up as little energy as possible for you to set up. If you have a tent, you're in luck. A dining fly or other tarp can also expand your possibilities. A plastic ground cloth or a poncho with a hood tied Clothes can also serve as a shelter. Pitch it close to the ground to block the wind. That is going to be one of your requirements coming up here, is to improvise a natural shelter and spend a night in your shelter. So for that one, we're going to need a picture of your shelter that you have improvised. I can't verify that you've spent a night in it, but we're going with a scout is trustworthy on that one. So if you tell me that you did it, I'm going to believe you, and you should maintain your principles of the scout law here and be trustworthy on that. Building a shelter. Before building a shelter, think about how you will build it and then locate the right site for it. The site should be relatively level but sloping enough and high enough to provide adequate drainage. The site should not expose to wind or drifting sand or snow. Don't choose a site under dead branches or close to a dead tree that is still standing. So we always check the trees around us, branches around us, to make sure we're not going to get something to fall on us. If you will be building your shelter from native materials, is there sufficient supply nearby? The closer the materials are, the less energy you will use gathering them. Is there plentiful supply of firewood? Also evaluate any risks of rock falls, landslides, flood, avalanches, lighting, or any other hazard. A good site will be near water, which is one of your priorities for surviving, but not so near that you could be threatened by flash floods, insects, shifting river courses, or high tides. Visibility from air should be considered for aircraft trying to pinpoint your location, although if necessary you can set out a signal in a nearby clearing that points to where you are. A fallen tree or log, a large rock outcrop, an exposed root base, thickly vegetated brush, or a small spruce, fir, or pine trees, a snapped over sapling, or a lashed tripod, all can be used to improvise a shelter. Always remember that a small shelter means less work to build and less area to heat. Build the smallest shelter that is adequate for your needs. A shelter 7 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 2 feet high is large enough for one person in most survival situations. You will probably only be using it for a night or two anyway. If using a fallen tree, a rock, or a root base, first build a framework by propping up branches that are 1 to 3 inches diameter against the downwind side. Point the tips of the branches downward to form a 60-degree angle with the ground. This will help shed rain. Then weave smaller branches between larger ones and work large pieces of bark and boughs into this framework. If you brought along a rescue blanket or large sheet of plastic, drape it over the framework and anchor it with rocks if necessary. If I'm making an improvised shelter in the woods, this is what I do the most often, is assemble my sticks and then drape it with a plastic garbage bag, or a tarp is what I'm going to be doing today. Tarps are lightweight, and you should probably always carry one. I have a backpacking tarp. For the demonstration that I'm going to show you later on, I'm going to just use a regular old run-of-the-mill hardware store tarp. So if you are faced with a real survival situation, by all means use live branches. For the purposes, your life far outweighs any ecological detriment caused by stripping off the boughs you need for a shelter. If you lack a ground cloth, you will need a substantial mat of branches to insulate your body from the ground as well. Thickly vegetated brush or small spruce trees can be bundled together and tied at the top to fashion a fine shelter. By weaving other brush or branches in any gaps, you can weatherproof your shelter to withstand even a wind-driven downpour. So what they're talking about here is more of a debris hut type shelter. The more leaves and pine needles and sticks and vegetation of any kind that you can pile on there is going to make it more weatherproof and waterproof. Snapped over sapling, and again, for this merit badge, guys, don't unless you have permission from the landowner, don't go out to a public park or your scout camp or anything like that and start breaking off live trees or branches. It's not worth damaging the trees for the purposes of a merit badge, so find dead limbs and stuff that's already on the ground. Snow shelters. Snow can insulate you against the cold and block the wind. The simplest snow shelter is to burrow or dig into a snowdrift, and it can provide you with enough protection while you consider your next steps. More effective shelters include the tree pit, snow trench, and snow cave. In each case, you will need a tool for digging and shaping snow. That might be a shovel, a cook pot, a sturdy piece of bark, a stout stick, a license plate, or anything else you can find. So I'm going to let you guys go ahead and review the tree pit, snow trench. It's kind of hard to just describe that, so you have pictures in your book. Go ahead and read through those, and the snow cave. Whatever shelter you use, make its location obvious to rescuers, so set up tents and tarps where they can be seen from aircraft. if your shelter is hidden for like a snow cave, use native materials you have on hand to let others know where you are. So we will talk about ways to signal, ground to air signal, later on here. Number 4 is to build a fire. In chilly and cold weather, a fire can be important for maintaining body warmth, melting snow for water, drying out clothing, signaling for help, and raising your spirits. The importance of fire means that you should spend plenty of time getting it right. As with most survival situations, practice when you are not in an emergency situation in the best way to become good at it. It is especially important to practice using fire lighting methods other than matches and lighters, such as a magnifying glass, flint and steel, and fire by friction. We're going to be adding a couple of my previous videos in here of different ways to start a fire, different ways to lay a fire, different ways to build a fire. So we'll take a break here and cut to those videos about fire building, and I'll be right back with you. Alright, moving on to the 5th of our survival priorities is signal for help. Signaling for help can be very important if you have become lost, or if you or others in your group are injured and cannot be moved. Think about where you are, how you might be seen, and what you have on hand to make yourself and your location more visible to others. Consider any and all of the following signal methods. Noise. Recognized signals of distress include 3 blasts on a whistle, 3 shouts, 3 bursts from an air horn, or 3 of any other sounds delivered every minute or 2. The rule of 3s for signaling for distress. So that's how they signal that's how they signal in SOS. So it's groups of 3 there. Electronic devices such as mobile phones, but you have to be mindful of your signal there, or bring a satellite phone. Find out before you go into an area if you have reliable phone service. Mirrors and lights. So when the sun is shining, the flash of a light reflected with a signal mirror can be seen for miles. You can use a CD, DVD, flashlight. Use 3 flashes for your flashlight because that shows them that you're in distress. Flares can be found on airplanes and in some watercraft and motor vehicles because they're really bright. So to aim with your signal mirror, say if you can see a helicopter, say I see one, right over here, and I have my signal mirror, you can do it like this, or you can do it like this, and it shows you an example in your book here. But you get that sun reflecting off your mirror and get it to reflect on your hand, like in the bottom of in between your fingers here, and use that like a gun sight. So you reflect right there, and then you aim it up towards where the helicopter is. Put that in between the bottom of your fingers and reflect your flashes from your mirror onto that area, because you got to think the rays from that mirror are hitting your fingers, but the ones that are going through your fingers can go right directly to that aircraft. So that's a good way to aim it. Some of the other signal mirrors will have a little hole in the middle, and there's instructions on the back for how to use those. I have a little bit more difficulty with those because I've always just used the 2 fingers method. Color and motion. So hanging brightly colored clothing or camping gear on a tree branch can catch their attention. Flags, banners, contrasting colors, like green boughs on the snow, something like that, can help get their attention. Fire and smoke. A fire will probably already be part of your survival strategy. The light from it might attract attention at night, and smoke can be seen during the day. Experiment with ways to make the fire smoky by adding pitchy wood, damp leaves, branches, ferns, grasses, and other vegetation to the flames without actually putting out the fire. Alright, ground to air signals. There is 5 different ground to air signals that you need to memorize. Make them out of rocks, sticks, sleeping bags, branches, anything you can find. The letter V is require assistance. And this is one of your requirements here to know the 5 different ways to attract attention when lost, and ground to air signals is one of them. V is require assistance, X is require medical assistance, N for no, Y for yes, and an arrow for which direction that you want them to proceed. Shadows. You can lay out your ground to air signal with an eye towards the sun, and you can take the advantage of the shadows cast by logs, rocks, and the sides of a trench to make the signal more visible. Orienting the longer legs of a signal in the north-south direction will create the most effective shadows, especially in the early morning and late afternoon. That's just a way to increase the length of the size of your signal there. So number 6 in our survival priorities is to drink water. Drink plenty of water. It can't be overemphasized here. So you can survive for days We talk about the rule of threes in survival, so it's like 3 signals. If you're signaling, you can survive 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So you can survive a long time as long as you have enough water. I talked about it in the first aid merit badge, but stay hydrated even if it's cold. Ideally, you will be able to find water where you are, like from a lake, stream, or melting snow, or by guiding rainwater down a tarp or tent fly and into a container. Water may have collected in depressions in rocks, in the crotches of trees, or in the seeps along cliffs. One of your requirements here is going to be demonstrate 3 ways to treat water found in the outdoors and prepare it for drinking. So the 3 methods that we have here is boiling. Big bubbles mean no troubles is what the saying is for boiling, so get it to a rolling boil. Chemical treatment, like water treatment tablets, contain iodine or chlorine to kill the waterborne bacteria and viruses. They are effective and easy to use. I've always found that the iodine ones are, they work really well, but they can kind of taste kind of nasty, so I take like a drink powder or an emergency packet is what I use, some sort of a drink powder in that you can put in that so it doesn't taste quite so gnarly. Filtering. Most backcountry filters are simple handheld pumps used to force water through a screen with pores so small that bacteria and protozoa cannot get through. There's a lot of good water filters out there on the market. Sawyer water filters are like $20 or $25 and they work great. I have a bigger one for longer trips, but the little Sawyer inline ones are great. Number 7 on our survival priorities: don't worry about food. Now, people think they want to go pick berries and they have to be able to identify all these wild and native plants to have something to eat, but like I said, you have 3 weeks, maybe even more. So don't worry about trying to find food. It's too risky to eat something that you have not identified properly. So if you have food with you, of course eat it, but something that you brought out with you, but don't worry about finding natural food. Again, we want to remember to treat any water. Don't just drink out of a lake or stream. I think you guys all know that, but treat any water. Alright, different survival challenges. Certain environmental conditions can pose special challenges for wilderness survivors. Planning ahead for what you would do in each of the following settings will help you prepare to make good decisions. Cold and snow. Cold weather brings with it a very real danger of hypothermia. The temperature does not need to be all that low for hypothermia to be a concern. A cool, rainy day, especially if the wind is blowing, can be especially worrisome. Do all you can to keep yourself warm and dry. Watch those around you for signs that they're becoming chilled. Take steps to find shelter and, if possible, light a fire. Snow can also make survival more difficult by burying firewood and the native materials that could be used for making or improvising shelters. It is easy to lose gear in the snow. If snow gets into your clothing, it will melt and chill you. On the other hand, snow can be an effective resource for building a shelter. Snow is a very good insulator. The only thing that insulation is something that traps air, so there's lots of air trapped in snow usually. Usually an effective snow cave, they say you can keep a snow cave to 50 degrees with the warmth of a candle if it's insulated with enough snow. So be sure to drink plenty of fluids even though you might not feel thirsty. Melt snow over a stove or campfire. If the day is sunny, try laying out a dark colored plastic trash bag, which is why another reason you can should include one in your kit. Spread some snow on it and let the sunlight melt it. Wet forests. While forests can offer an abundance of materials for making shelters and building campfires, they can also be challenging, especially if the weather is wet. The shade of a forest floor can feel chilly, and dampness can make it seem much colder. As in other settings, do what you must to keep yourself and others dry and warm, and be on guard against hypothermia. Dense forests can make signaling to rescuers difficult, and you might need to move a short distance to a meadow, stream bank, or other open visible area for an aircraft to be able to see you. Consider your options carefully, though, before changing the locations, and mark your route clearly in case you need to find your way back. You can do that by, stacking rocks in a cairn, or breaking twigs, or signaling tape, like surveyor's tape. If you have that, you can tie that on branches. So always mark your way as you go. Hot and dry deserts. While the greatest challenge of desert survival might be staying cool during the day, nights are sometimes cold enough in arid regions for you to need clothing, shelter, and perhaps a fire to keep warm. Rest in a high shady spot during the day and then complete necessary activities in the cool of the evening or early morning. Wear sun protection if you have it, including long sleeves and a hat. A hat or some type of head cover will help you beat the heat. Wind. Wind can make other challenges more difficult to overcome. In hot weather, a wind might help keep you cooler, but can also sap away moisture and cause you to drink more water and more often. In cold weather, wind can blow warm air away from your body and cause temperature to seem colder than what it is. A steady wind can be exhausting as it hammers away at your energy and morale. Protect yourself from the wind by wearing a windproof outer layer, a jacket, rain gear, or even a tarp or tent fly. Seek shelter on the calm side of a boulder or large tree. If the weather is chilly or cold, watch for any signs of hypothermia. Another good use for your rain gear there. Oceans, lakes, and rivers. Emergencies on water often begin when a watercraft capsizes or when someone falls from shore or from a boat. If that is the case, the first concern is to protect those in the water against drowning. They will need to get to dry land, get back into their watercraft, or stay afloat until help arrives. If you are in cold water, very near the shore, get everyone out of the water as soon as possible to help avoid hypothermia. If you capsize far from shore, try to get as much of your body out of the water as possible by climbing on the capsized craft. If that is not possible, conserve energy and body heat by floating with your personal flotation device and clothing on, and your head positioned so that you can breathe with your legs drawn up close to your body. Huddle together with others if you're not alone, and that's just to stay warm. A capsized canoe, boat, or other watercraft, even if damaged, might still float. It is also more visible than a person alone in the water. Canoes and small boats can sometimes be righted, but don't waste much energy in the effort. You can climb into a swamp boat and it should still keep you on the surface. If that isn't possible, hang on to the side of the boat and use it to help you rest and keep your head above water. When a survival situation involves a life raft, look for the storage compartments containing an emergency kit that might contain first aid supplies, water, signaling devices, and emergency food, and follow the instructions with that kit. Always wear a life jacket. That's a big one. In our state, you have to have one with you, but you don't have to have it on, but I suggest you always have it on. If you fall and hit your head and you become unconscious, it'll keep you above water, keep you from drowning. If you're stranded in the ocean, don't drink the water. If you're stuck in some rapids, keep your feet up out of the water because your feet can get tangled in the rocks below the surface and pull you under. Page 44 in my book here, there's some pictures on how to stay warm on everything I just described, so you guys can go ahead and review those on your own. Motoring. The ease of traveling into many backcountry regions by motorized vehicle can cause people to forget to take steps to prepare for wilderness survival. A snowmobile, all-terrain vehicle, motorbike, or even four-wheel drive SUV can seem very safe because it gets us to places quickly. However, should you run out of fuel or break down, you can find yourself every bit as stranded as if you had hiked there. The real advantage that we have there is that you can carry more gear, so any vehicle that I own has always had some sort of a big survival kit in it, so you can have the ability to take the resources with you there as long as you're prepared for it. Flying. Among the more dramatic survival situations are those created when an airplane goes down. Pilots file flight plans, and aircraft carry locator beacons to help it make it easier to locate and rescue survivors of plane crashes and forced landings, as well as those involved in parasailing and skydiving accidents. Those who are stranded with a downed aircraft should stay close to the wreckage. To increase the possibility of survival, passengers in private aircraft should pack extra clothing. The weather might be warm when the plane lifts off, but much colder in the high country or along the aircraft's route. So those are some of the unique survival environments. So we're going to move on to protecting yourself in the wilderness. Making good choices to protect yourself from insects, reptiles, and wild animals is one of the many challenges of wilderness survival. Keep this information in mind on any hike, camp out, or other situation where you are sharing the backcountry with wildlife, small and large. Insects are a big one. I kind of covered that a little bit in first aid, but if you have it, use insect repellent, wear a long sleeve shirt, long pants, and a hat, tie a bandana around your face, or use a spare t-shirt to protect your head. You can protect your hands with gloves or a pair of socks over them. You can put mud on your skin, build a fire and stay close to the smoke, and consider moving to a higher ground where it might be breezier. For ticks, you could tuck your pant leg into your socks or tie some duct tape around your pant leg. So reptiles. While snakes are common in many parts of the country, snake bites are rare and seldom result in death. Snakes try to avoid humans, usually only striking when cornered. The bite of a non-venomous snake causes only minor puncture wounds. We talked about that in first aid, how you should treat that. The bite of a venomous snake may cause the victim to feel sharp burning pain. The area around the bite might swell and become discolored. However, a venomous snake does not always inject venom when it bites. The best advice is to treat every snake bite as if it were inflicted by a venomous snake. Again, like I talked about in first aid, a hiking stick does double duty when you walk through places where snakes are common. So I use the stick ahead of me to bang on brushwood, piles, grass around me. So before you go, find out what kinds of wildlife inhabit the area. Doing so will help you be prepared. Predatory animals. Be especially aware of the kinds of predatory animals you might meet during your adventures. Wolves, coyotes, and cougars are curious, so if you happen upon such an animal, face the creature and slowly retreat from the area. Do not approach the animal, run, or play dead. Make yourself as big as possible by waving your arms and clothing above your head. Make lots of noise. If you have no escape or become cornered, throw rocks and sticks. Remember, no matter what kind of wild animal, give all wildlife a wide berth, especially young animals with their mother. Bears are part of many backcountry ecosystems, and the same guidelines scouts follow to keep bears and themselves safe during outdoor adventures can be adapted during survival emergencies to allow people and bears to share the same wilderness areas without incident. You might need to adapt some of these guidelines to fit the circumstances of survival situations. So you have a bear safety checklist here. I'll let you guys go over that on your own. It's pretty self-explanatory. Like everything I just said, don't approach them, make yourself large and slowly retreat. Keep all your food and scented products at least 200 feet away from you. Cook 200 feet away from your campsite. Alright, the next step here is our wilderness first aid. Since we are teaching first aid merit badge as part of this summer camp here, I'm not going to go back over these because they are covered in the first aid merit badge. Just a final word here, in your book, outdoor adventures are among the highlights of scouting. Plan ahead and prepare so that you don't get into survival situations. Nearly every time, you and those in your group will be fine. Go to the backcountry with the understanding that there are risks to be managed and that sometimes emergencies can arise. When they do, use your skills, the gear you have with you, and the resources around you. Keep a positive attitude, don't ever give up, do your best, and expect good things to happen. That is the heart of wilderness survival. I know that's kind of a lot of information thrown at you fast. I encourage you guys to read through your book on your own and do any research that you feel like you need to do. I'm going to show you, I'm going to take you here in a minute and show you my survival shelter, how I built it, and you guys are going to have to build one of your own. You can do it the same way I did, or you can use one of the ones in the book, or any other improvised shelter that you build yourself. This does not include a tent, so you can include the use of your tarp, but please try to use as many natural materials as possible. As far as your homework goes, all of your stuff is going to be turned into the same email address, the virtual camp at Winnebago. We'll put that up on the screen for you now. I need number 5, put together a personal survival kit. I've already explained how each of the items are used, so I just need you to put together your kit. You can snap a picture and send that in. Using 3 different methods other than matches, build and light 3 fires. I've included some videos of different ways that I do it. You must get an adult supervision while you're doing this. Get permission and supervision from an adult, or responsible adult with you. And then number 8 is improvise a natural shelter. So use techniques that have little negative impact on the environment, so don't go out cutting down a bunch of saplings and branches and stuff. Spend the night in your shelter. Scout is trustworthy. I trust that you guys are actually going to spend the night in your shelter. I would love to see pictures. I need to see pictures of your shelter. I would love to see pictures of you actually spending the night in your shelter. So those are the main 3 things that I need you guys to turn in for me to be able to check off these blue cards. Alright, helicopter's gone. So those are the 3 requirements I need from you guys. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us on our summer camp here. This is something that obviously we're trying new for this year with the COVID and everything, so thanks for participating. Anything that you would like to share, any questions you have that goes beyond what is required from the merit badge, please feel free to email me. I do have a lot of you, so please be mindful. I might not be able to get back to you immediately, but I will get back to all of you, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out with us. Again, my name is Greg Muller with the Winnebago Council here in Northeast Iowa, and you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you. So here is my shelter. You can see I'm up against a large tree, and I've stacked plenty of sticks up against the tree. And then I've just wrapped my backpacking tarp around it. But you can also use leaves, sticks, pine needles, any brush you can find. The only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this down, and I'm going to add some more debris on the outside to help keep it in place. But this is all you need. This will keep me dry. And the prevailing direction of the wind here is into this side of the shelter, so it's not going to blow rain down in on me from the other direction. So it's just big enough for me to get in and lay down. I'm going to put some sticks in there, some boughs in there to lay on, and I'll probably put a ground tarp down just to keep myself dry. But so it doesn't need to be anything too extravagant. You can make it out of 100% natural materials, or you can make it out of something out of your survival kit. So I look forward to seeing them.